Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And this evening we have Todd Cheney's government students from Hartland High School joining us to lead the pledge. Good evening. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go. Good evening. The clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Trustee Petrucci?
Here.
Trustee Kalani?
Here.
Treasurer Horning?
Here.
Clerk Hopkins here. Supervisor Fountain?
Here.
Trustee Harper and Jermaine are absent. We have quorum of the board. We also have present Township Manager James Wickman.
Thank you. Item number 5 is approval of our meeting agenda. So moved.
Second, but I'd like to add under 8A, Hartland Senior Center, and then move the other 2 items to B and C.
You support that?
I support that.
Okay. I have a motion by Trustee Kalani, second by Treasurer Horning. Any other discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. 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 Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next is call to the public. If you'd like to come forward at call to the public, all we ask is you state your name and your address for the record, and you can either come up to the podium, or if you want to sit at the chair there, that's fine too, because this is being recorded by our television. So anybody at call to the public this evening? Good evening.
Hi, Jeff Connors, 5640 Bullard. Just wanted to kind of ask you guys if there was any possibility and some help with Lake Tyrone. At this point, we've gotten some assistance from Tyrone Township in gaining a grant to help us in investigating and doing the science on the weed control and problems we have in the lake. And we're basically looking to see if we can get the lower half of the lake, because it's more or less split in half, to get some assistance through you guys as well, and whether that be grants or some other ideas that you all may have in helping gain some additional funding in order to carry out this first phase in restoring the lake.
Okay. We will take that under consideration, and somebody either through the board or through staff will get back with you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else this evening that call to the public? Being none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of our consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Treasurer Horning, second by Trustee Petrucci. Any discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. 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 Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 8 is pending business, and we had our first item has been changed to the Senior Center update. Good evening.
Hi.
And welcome.
Hi, everybody. Kim, you can come on up. Kathy asked us to be here today so I could introduce Kim Ladd, who's really taking my place at the Senior Center. I want to first thank you, though, always for your long time and continued support of the Senior Center. And the 2013 numbers will be coming shortly in the beginning of January for you. Things have stayed pretty steady, so we're happy with that. I have, as of the end of June, mostly retired, I'm still working part-time. I'm working like 14 hours a week. But Kim, who's came to us through Brighton's Community Education Department, is really taking over the day-to-day operation of the center. I help out with some of the, I try to pay the bills and do grant reports and keep track of the budget. But Kim really is doing the major responsibility for the center now. So I just want to introduce Kim Ladd, and I'm very, very happy. She's doing a great job for us.
Thank you.
Well, you guys all know Alice, so I've heard many, many times I have big shoes to fill. So I'm hoping that if there's anything that you need from me, you can call. You know, I'm at the center, like Alice said, every day. So, you can leave me a message if there's something you do need from us. I'm hoping, to learn more about, the budget as we go through and, kind of baby step it in. The day-to-day operations were probably a huge challenge. We do have quite a few members and programs and wonderful things happening over there. So I'm very fortunate to have landed where I have. So I'm feeling pretty lucky to be able to work with her for a short time and kind of keep going what she has created. So
Thank you. And thank you for all you do for our community.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, item number 8B is resolution setting forth sewer and water fees, rates, and charges for 2014. This was part of our rate study that we've been working on and keeping up to date on a yearly basis, and this basically sets forth the sewer and water rates and charges that will be assessed going forward, starting in April, correct? Does it follow our fiscal year?
The user rates start in April. The per RU cost for water is going up January 1st.
January 1st.
We do those on a calendar year. And as stated, these do follow the rate study, and we've not seen anything in the performance of those funds to indicate a need to deviate from that. It has been going on 2 years since the rate study was adopted, and we did a full informational campaign. So we're having some internal discussions about, with the April bill, of maybe putting out more information to remind people and to point people towards, FAQ and other resources to help understand why the quarterly increases are in place. And so we'll try to get those questions answered proactively.
Are there any questions?
How would you define the proactive? In 2 weeks or?
We're targeting the April billing period. A community life article, press releases, website, Facebook, those types of things.
I would move to approve resolution setting forth sewer and water fees, rates, and charges.
Support. Motion by Clerk Hopkins, second by Trustee Germain. Is there any other discussion? Being none, I'll have the clerk please call the roll.
Trustee Petrucci?
Yes.
Trustee Harper is absent. Trustee Germain?
Yes.
Trustee Kalani?
Yes.
Treasurer Horning?
Yes.
Clerk Hopkins, yes. Supervisor Fountain?
Yes.
Resolution carries.
Thank you. Item number 8C is tax foreclosure consent judgment. That was on a parcel on M59, if you recall. That was, there was a land contract. Had sewer assessments attached to it, went into foreclosure, and then hence it went to the tax tribunal for judgment as to how it could, that was one of the questions, and then if there could be a settlement based on the township to settle out the balance of the RUs.
Yeah, it didn't. The foreclosure proceedings are through circuit court, and that's where we were at, and we ultimately prevailed there. And so the property owners had appealed to the Court of Appeals, so that could be a couple of years. In the interim, they do have an interested buyer and a purchase agreement and are interested in closing. They've indicated as soon as later this week. In order to do so, this agreement that's been circulating in draft form for quite some time would need to be approved. And we're We've analyzed it thoroughly. We're fine with it. So is the Attorney General's office, so is Livingston County. The long and short of it is all the delinquent amounts to date, including all the accrued interest and penalties, would be rolled into a future assessment payment. And at the end of the day, we would be held harmless. We wouldn't have any loss on that property. The new property owner would take that over, and they've got plans to develop it. So, and they're willing to accept those terms. So, we think it's a reasonable solution that keeps the township whole.
Well, I'll move to authorize the supervisor and clerk to sign the agreement with the estate of Daniels et al., pending final approval by the township attorney and the township manager.
Support. Motion by Trustee Kalani, second by Trustee Germain. Is there any other discussion?
Yes, I have one question. It's my understanding that, as you just stated, the attorneys for the state would like to close, which means they would be accepting the agreement, ideally by the 20th of December. While the motion that I just supported does not clearly indicate this, I just want confirmation that township attorney and township manager are not going to authorize the supervisor and clerk to sign the agreement until the other attorneys have approved. Is that correct?
Yeah, the gist of it is the draft language that you have is all clear by us and the Attorney General's office. What's pending is some feedback from the property owner's attorney about some assignment agreement language that they are still working through. We understand what they're trying to achieve, and it's pretty innocuous, so if a few words change in the document, we're okay with it.
That's what I assumed. I just want clarification.
And it wouldn't change the substance of the format here. If it's anything off the wall, then we'll say no. So,
any other questions? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item number 9 is new business. It's proclamation to honor Kelly Summerfield, who had been a long-term planning commissioner. I'd like to thank Clerk Hopkins for assisting with that. And when we have people who have been part of our organization and giving their time and effort, we like to acknowledge them. So on behalf of the township, thanks, Larry, for doing that. I don't know if there's anything else we needed. It was just a proclamation for basically a thank you for him. And do we have something to sign afterwards?
With the new system, I don't have it ready ahead of time.
We'll have it at our next meeting, and we can forward that to Kelly.
Do we need a vote on it?
Yes, please. Yes. It's a resolution.
It's a resolution?
Yep.
So I'll move resolution number 13R.
We don't number them ahead of time anymore. Just move to approve the resolution honoring Kelly Summerfield.
So moved.
Second.
Had a motion and support. Will clerk please call the roll?
Supervisor Fountain?
Yes.
Clerk Hopkins, yes. Treasurer Horning?
Yes.
Trustee Kalani?
Yes.
Trustee Germain?
Yes.
Trustee Harper is absent. Trustee Petrucci?
Here. Yes.
Resolution carries.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. And this is our last scheduled meeting for this year. And we'll do board reports. We'll start with Trustee Petrucci.
I just wanted to thank the Hartland Firefighters Association for holding their Santa Day last Saturday. It was a snowy day, but they still had a lot of participation through the community. The families can bring their little ones up there to see Santa Claus in a safe environment. They have the high school doing different things there with the choir, and they have different events there. It's a really nice program that they put together, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a few days to set up, and I just want to thank them publicly and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Clerk Hopkins?
I have nothing other than to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and look forward to working with you all in the next year.
Thank you. Treasurer Horning?
Ditto to Larry's comments.
Thank you. I got the nasty blue screen if you're wondering what I'm trying to do, so you may have to follow one of your... Trustee Kalani?
I have no report, but once again, I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
And Trustee Germain?
Not to repeat, but I think it's worth wishing everyone a happy holiday greeting. And I also would like to thank the township for the Christmas party that was held for the staff. I think that was a nice thing to do, and from my feedback, everyone had a really good time. It's good for morale and set the tone for the next year.
Thank you. And my best wishes for safe travel and those heading out over the holiday season. Move on to manager's report. Manager Wickman.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I just wanted to highlight a couple items from the operational reports. And if didn't get a chance to catch the email, big news this afternoon was our improvement of the bond rating. We went from A to AA with a stable outlook. And while I should sit here and say that I'm not surprised by that, I actually am pleasantly surprised that they had done that. We were trying for that over the years, and we're identifying strategies to do. But apparently, they've recognized the work of the board, and especially with all the sewer considerations, and I'm very pleased by that. And did also want to highlight, as a follow-up to the Christmas party, the staff always appreciates having those connections with the board, and so you'll be hearing from Sharon on a regular basis to try to see if any times throughout the year that you might be, board members might be able to attend one of our staff meetings. They're held every Wednesday morning following a regular board meeting at 8:30. Our goal would be if a board member can make at least one of those a year, and we'll be in touch on the dates, and if it ever works out for you to attend, staff does appreciate having those opportunities, and you can kind of see what a little better glimpse of some of the operations. So we'll be in touch for that. We do have, I will highlight, we're working on performance goals for staff, and I think we'll want to be thinking about that for myself, too. Obviously, we're doing the strategic plan, and all those things will apply, but I would anticipate that sometime in January we're setting down those performance goals. It's a short year, if you recall, because we did it partway into the year this year, but we can, if you want to be thinking about that. And then I think those are the major highlights. Happy to answer any questions the board may have. Merry Christmas.
I do have one question. Yeah. And it's just a follow-up from the Hartland moms.
Yes.
Has there been any news from the MDOT with regards to the U-turn signal at M59 Hartland Road? Have we had any response from them yet?
Nothing new. We had that meeting back in November, and some representatives of residents attended that, where we had MDOT, State Police, Sheriff Department, and there was a lot of feedback provided. MDOT did a lot of listening. There was a lot of good information shared, and I think the level of understanding of traffic engineering came away much better, that they understood that it wasn't a simple fix, or if you did one thing here would have a major effect out somewhere else. So I think that was where it was left. I don't think anybody left with there was an expectation that any major revisions were going to be made to the design. I believe it'll be an ongoing conversation with us and MDOT about any improvements we can do to the signaling or signage. As usual, they're always open to that.
Just if I could give a little more, I was in that meeting.
Yeah.
And as James said, MDOT did a lot of listening. I mean, they did take notes and kind of, throughout we could look at these particular things, phasing of lights and things like that. So looked out of that meeting, figuring MDOT was going to be doing some further investigation on some of those things that were shared with them, and see if they could come.
We know they're not going to change the pattern, but if they could just make the signage a little better than it is, may help.
Yeah, we shared all that.
We're going to follow up on it then, or sort of follow up?
Bob's kind of in conversations with them. He's kind of a point person for the township.
Some of the challenges, if you get 5 people in the room, there's 5 different opinions about what that signage should be, and so it's inevitable. But I think they're open to trying new things. We'll keep in touch.
It was a good meeting, too. The state police were there as well. Mike Murphy was there, so they got good information from a lot of sources.
I did have one other item. I do have a candidate for the Compensation Commission, and they are going to be on our next board meeting. But I have somebody that I'd like to recommend to the board, and then that information will be available at the next. That's the only person we didn't fill, and they don't meet in 2014. But I want to make sure that they started their term accordingly. So, anything else at that point? Thanks, James. Let me see. We're going to item number 12. Information and discussion on Capital Projects Fund. Are you going to put this on the overhead?
Yeah.
Okay.
So after our discussion last week, I did provide the update that the sheriff contract had been left in the budget projection, and so I've corrected those. The end result of that is that we're projected the end of the year with about $500,000 in excess of 1 year's expenses. And so, per our normal practice, we would look to transfer that amount over into the Capital Projects Fund, which would put our total unrestricted cash at approximately this amount. And again, it was brought up last week, and it should be reminded that the actual unrestricted could be greater. We're still holding a little less than $100,000 in that Bergen Road Fund if for some reason the board chose to unencumber that. So that's the amount of cash we'll be entering into next fiscal year with. And so my goal, hopefully for this evening, is to get some consensus or guidance on, as we look at all these capital projects, we're considering where we want to leave ourselves in these fund balances. We're working on budgets for next year. Certainly you can anticipate we'll have a couple $100,000 in surplus in general fund again, and we'll have this fund balance with which to work. So I don't know where you want to start the discussion, but previously there had been discussion about keeping that 401 fund around the $500,000 number, and I don't know whether that's changed or not from your viewpoint. We would need to know that. So.
Were we going to get a list of those projects that we discussed, and with some just so we at least have a list to start with?
That's the next discussion. I was hoping to kind of have the big picture financial discussion, and at the next meeting we'll be looking at a list of all the projects that have been talked about, and that's part of the strategic plan discussion. Is we need to start prioritizing those, and that's a board exercise as well.
Well, if I recall, not too long ago, we discussed the number of $500,000 as to keep that balance in that fund. That's what I recall.
But was that keep that balance, or we didn't want to go below?
We didn't want to go below that number, correct.
It wasn't like that was the max, it was
correct.
the minimum.
And that was also getting the general fund to a 1-to-1 basis also.
Yeah, we had, I want to say that discussion was had maybe, well, no, it was after we spent down and paid off the hall. Jeff? Is that still a consensus of the board? Is there a differing thought than that?
without knowing the projects, I don't know that I can say, just sitting here right now, I'm willing to spend $500,000 on projects.
Yeah.
$128,000 on projects next year.
Yes, and that's fair enough, and I don't mean to imply that that's the question before you, because certainly it's just as we start to put that together, because that's what we're working our way towards is a capital improvement plan for parks. It helps to just take a look at the fund balance picture first, but yes, ultimately the board will have to approve whether you even want to spend down to 500, if that's not what we're asking.
But it's not only parks, we've discussed other elements other than parks for capital improvement.
Correct, yes, right.
So was that your answer? Was it your answer?
Well, I mean, I think that some of the work that the Roads and Pathways group are doing might factor into this discussion, and I don't know that I want to say, okay, well, I want it to be I want a minimum of 500 in there, and then we come up with $428,000 worth of projects, and then the Road and Pathways people come back and say, hey, we got these, and now we've already earmarked the money. So I don't know that I'm ready to sit here right now and identify what that number is.
I think that's a fair statement. All I was bringing up is where we had talked about previously in previous discussions was a number.
And we won't really know that. I mean, the plan itself wouldn't be finalized till August. I mean, we'll have an outline of some thoughts and where we want to go, and the whole millage question come early next year, looking at probably February at this point. But that's not the final plan, because then it's public hearings and revising that before there's any really millage considered. Yes, it's hard to imagine that the kinds of needs that will come out of that can easily be addressed in a reasonable, feasible millage amount. And the board would probably want to discuss what part of its 401 or general fund it would want to commit to roads if it wants to step up higher in that area, or in response to a potential no vote on a millage too, how that might change our strategic use of these funds. Now, there were a number of projects identified that there seemed to be interest in getting done in 2014, and so at some point you'll have to decide how far you're willing to go, knowing that there'll be unanswered questions in that regard for roads and pathways until November. But things to start thinking about.
Yeah, I'd like to see a list of what those potential projects for 2014 are.
Yep.
I mean, I know they're in that.
They're in the notes, but
but it's kind of hard to.
We're pulling them together, yeah. And that will be on the next meeting.
It's a nice segue into our next agenda item.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, right. Because
it's the first thing on the handout.
Yeah. Anything else on this before we? So you have a draft of strategic plan staff has been working through, and so what you have are the 30,000-foot milestones that we're looking at for next year. You will note that some of these, for various reasons, we're proposing really are early 2015 type of goals. So not all of them are we keeping in the 1-year task that came out of the retreat. I think you'll find there's good reason for that, but we can sort of talk through these, and by no means are these final. We're going to talk about these tomorrow with the directors in a group setting, but wanted to give you a preview of kind of where we're going with it, get your preliminary feedback, if any, before we start to gel on ideas and timelines. You have, for the park improvements, The first item is the conversation we're having right now. The second item is the one we'll have at the next meeting, is taking those potential projects and trying to do some prioritization to them. And probably what we'll do, similar exercises before, we'll put those in a list and circulate them as sort of a survey to the board to have you do that, maybe do some ranking ahead of time. That way we can come in with your feedback already compiled, and then you can jump off and adjust it from there. So there's more to come on that. And then I'm sure, we'll identify what amongst those projects we want to get done in 2014. Taking in all those things we've already talked about into consideration, and we've, said that'll be the construction season is getting those things done for Public Works. The second stage then would be to also take that list and start identifying the grant opportunities and where there could be fundraising or partnering or cost sharing, those types of things. The last thing on that park improvements list is the Parks Master Plan. It is expired. We intentionally let it do so. There was no advantage to renewing it right away because we knew that we were not pursuing DNR grants, or other grants. The master plan will be required for DNR grants, and so we would propose to have that updated next year. And then the table would be set for applying for DNR grants as early as 2015. And by that time, we will have really settled in on that CIP for park improvements, and really the other things falling into place that'll impact the CIP roads and pathways and whatnot. So then in the pathways area, that's where we're focusing on the road and pathways plan and following through on that, but there's a piece of that, some discussion that we'll probably want to have around the project list because, we've talked about maybe some sidewalk segments here or some streetscape or whatever type of projects you might anticipate. We'll want to talk about whether that's a 401 capital projects fund project or whether that is something the board will want to consider general fund dollars or do an SAD or a little bit of both, whether we want to take advantage of some possible grants and wait that out a little bit. Those are types of discussions. And that applies to the village plan as well. Specifically, there's been some interest in talking about maybe plugging in a number into the budget to fill in some of the gaps in the sidewalk network down in the village, mainly along Kraus Road between Avon and Creekside, and then some areas that are missing on the west side of Avon and some areas along Avon that are in need of some repair. That may be what the board wishes to do next year. There's a part of that conversation where if the board is willing to wait, we can try to pursue maybe a Safe Routes to School grant or something like that that could help pay for that. It wouldn't be a major project, so you could probably accomplish a lot with a little bit. It's also, saving $10,000, $20,000, $40,000 is still saved money. So if the board's interested in waiting for that possibility, we could talk about that. Part of that too is also what we haven't really talked about in a while is a DDA. I've been the first one to say that DDAs aren't for us, and that because of the ability of the taxing units to opt out of DDAs now, that it really isn't worth the effort. I think there's, as the longer I've looked at this issue with the village plan, I think there's an opportunity there to have some sincere conversations with those taxing units to say that if we kept the focus of a DDA to what it was intended to be. I mean, the first paragraph of the DDA Act is for deteriorated downtown properties. And I think if we talk to the county and other units, that if we keep this narrow in scope, we're not talking large dollar amounts, and yet it will be dollar amounts that over time will help a little bit with some of those issues, that it will have an impact, that it will turn that area around. Yeah.
Well, what you can do is you can also enter into agreements. You can enter into tax
increment financing.
Tax increment financing agreements, so you can limit the scope and limit the time period and so forth. And that's probably the only way you're going to get any assistance.
Yeah.
I do know my new organization is because it's affected by 5 counties and over 200 tax increment financing authorities. It siphons the taxes that get siphoned off for projects like downtown development authorities, brownfield authorities, is close to $1 million a year. Mm-hmm. And that $1 million a year has had an effect on what we do in terms of fees and capital improvement projects. And because of Headley rollback, we're also losing another $8 million a year. And that affects the Metro Park system considerably. So we've taken a new position that hasn't been taken in years past, and so unfortunately we're still affected by existing DDAs. But what really causes me a concern is where a DDA sort of takes on the role of a chamber of commerce. And that's what's going on in Howell, and that's what goes on in Brighton Township, in Brighton City, where you have the merchants down there who are all part of the chamber, but they shift the responsibility to the DDA for all the different kinds of programs that typically a chamber of commerce would be responsible for. Most recently I saw in Howell advertising on WHMI that they were having, the DDA was sponsoring a Halloween walk or fun night or whatever. Bring your kids. And I'm like, wait a minute.
This is not your grandfather's DDA. This is, we're talking 2.5 blocks of very limited properties, and the amount of taxable value in that area is less than $2 million. And so you can do the math on the .21 that Metro Parks collect. It's a couple $100 a year if of the increment of the increase.
Well, because in a DDA, the only people that would be left are the fire department, our money that are being captured, right? Because the schools, LESA, and the county have all opted out.
Well, no, we can have the conversation. We can talk to the county and ask them not to opt out.
Well, they've opted out on every project, every one that's been presented.
I understand that. Yeah. That's why I'd like to think my idea is not so crazy, that it's not where they take a wide brush and say this is a DDA. This is a very narrow, very small, low impact, 8 acres worth of DDA that even though it only collects, a couple $1,000s a year, that money still could be used to assist with these things.
And then don't DDAs typically have to have an administrator that gets paid and things like that?
If you don't, you don't have to. This would be very small in scope. Okay. It would just
and that's something I know that Pittsfield Township recently came to the way they recently formed their DDA. Or doing I believe they're just forming their DDA. And what they did, was pretty slick what they put together. They actually kind of anticipated that certain taxing jurisdictions would opt out of the DDA. And so what they did was they actually forwarded a tax increment financing agreement and limited it to so many years and half the amount they could take out of it, and limited it to. Now, personally, I thought that was pretty slick because I think it was a good way to do it. What happens in some of these areas is you get like, in the downtown, what they've identified in a downtown area, big vacant parcel, and then suddenly, that parcel was $100,000, but then there's a Home Depot on there. Suddenly that parcel is now, a $4 million parcel because there's a Home Depot located on it.
Yep.
And so that tax increment financing, the difference goes significantly up. There's a significant tax increment change there that results in taxes going to the DDA. And that's never been, and the Downtown Development Association is extremely, they use a lot of their funding to help lobby to protect that interest. And it's real tough because legislators love economic development. Those are all tools in the box that they think that needs to help establish economic development. And you go up in Lansing, it's real hard to get those laws changed. What they're hurting, though, are all those taxing jurisdictions and local for example, one of the biggest problems, we always got to be careful of this, is these special millages, like a library millage. People are told that when they go and approve a library millage, that money's all going to the library. You have a DDA, they capture a portion of that library millage, or they capture that portion of that fire millage, or that police millage, or what have you. That's not what that should be. Those special millages, the voters are not aware of that, and the voters should be aware of that, or they would never approve a downtown development authority.
The other millages would be Metro Parks, EMS, library, fire, counties. The county has a couple of them, EMS, veterans, those ones. All told, it's like eight mills, give or take. Again, I didn't mean to take a long rabbit trail, but it's something to talk about. In the first couple of years, it wouldn't be very much. Over time, it'd be a couple $1,000s a year, and every little bit will help. And it'll be a traditional, but it's something to talk about.
James, I know the previous board in the early 2000s talked about doing a DDA.
Yeah.
They did a lot of research.
Right.
So there's been a lot of homework at some point done. I don't know if it's still, something that would carry on to today's.
Well, I guess what they did, they probably looked at 59 is.
The goal was to incorporate the village.
Right, the village and 59.
But there was discussion of it going all the way down to 59 on both sides of the freeway.
Yes. That's why there was DDA reform in the 90s, because it was, and you had the townships especially were guilty of naming, a 2-mile stretch, the DDA, even though nothing was there, and then you're putting these other, and that's why units today, if I were working in the county, I'd say no way. But this is limited scope. We can't ever expand it without them approving it. I think it's worth talking about, and without necessarily spending a lot of energy on, because the amount that we might get from it for the benefit of that area probably isn't worth it. And then, of course, we can qualify that area as a low mod income area for other grant opportunities too. So I think there's things worth talking about there. Community events. We talked a little bit about that, so this was added since the retreat, and us just doing a couple of things, identifying some strategies. I think we've got a couple of ideas that we're kind of talking through with staff right now, including making staff available to maybe serve in some of these places to try to help grease the skids or some sort of volunteer promotion program.
Will the Chamber of Commerce be involved with that discussion?
Oh, sure, yeah.
It just seems like it would be the right...
Yeah, Chamber, Community Council.
Okay.
Yeah. So moving to sustainability, we've already talked about doing a follow-up citizen survey that, and this would be specifically for police and for the roads issue, and that would be around in the May timeframe. We weren't, when we were just talking about roads, we weren't sure we were going to expend the money, but I think we were begging some answers on the police perception and resident feedback, so it makes sense to do that. So looking to do a survey specific to those two items. And then taking a look at that and continuing to look at data from the Sheriff's Department and just continue these conversations, and if there comes a time where it makes sense to do something different or more, our overall goal was to improve that somehow in the 5 years, and this is a step in the right direction. Roads, of course, we know the path that that's on. Water, well, specific to water, we had some discussions around the question of how ready we are for development in the water system, namely with some of our vacant parcels and maybe where the master plan doesn't specifically give us the answers that we look for when a specific vacant parcel comes up for questions. So we would look to study that issue a little bit more and be more proactive and ready to go when those questions arise, whether it's providing water service down to Pleasant Valley or even the land contract piece tonight, or down to Hacker, or whatever that next thing might be. We would look to study that a little bit more and kind of be more developer-friendly in that way. We're already underway on a Boyle model update when it comes to fiscal health. This is going to be the most comprehensive update to the Boyle model that we've had since it was first used. So that's coming right around the corner. And so I think that was already in the works towards the fiscal health issue.
Just for those that may be at home wondering what the Boyle model is, could you just explain for the folks that are here just what the Boyle model is?
In how many minutes or less? 3 minutes. Okay. So we have, of course, a number of vacant parcels that had signed up for sewer service back in the booming years before the recession. And in signing up for that, they have to make assessment payments to pay for that sewer service because we had to go into debt to build the sewer system. The problem is when the recession came is that a number of those properties stopped paying the bill, and which might be okay if we could, just take the property and sell it and get the money back. Unfortunately, property values plummeted so much during that time that the property wasn't even worth how much they owed. And so that put us in a bad situation in a couple of properties. And we've been, since 2008, sort of charting our course through it. And the Boyle model is a very dynamic, an actuarial model, a stochastic model that looks at all these different factors and kind of looks at the potential scenarios that could play out for us and ultimately our ability to pay back the bonds, pay back the debt. And so we have the bottom line of that analysis is that it's a problem and it's a manageable problem, that we are in a safe position to kind of ride out the negative economic impacts for 5 to 10 years. Every year, actual economics have outperformed the model, so that's good. And so we'll see that when we see the update. And in spite of that situation, one that is very bad for many of our neighbors, like Tyrone and Howell and Handy Township, that they're having major issues with this. Our issue is manageable. We're a large enough system that we're able to absorb it. And at the end of the day, as you heard earlier tonight, the creditors improved our bond rating nonetheless. When early on they gave us a negative outlook and downgraded our bond rating, it's now gone up 2 clicks because of those efforts. So we're plugging all these. So many things have happened in the couple of years since that Boyle model was developed. We're plugging in all those changes and assumptions for actual results, and you'll see the impact of that.
Digest version.
There it is.
Well, it's really important that people know that, there was an issue that we asked for help from the county. We asked for help from the state, and they said, it's your problem and you figure it out. So we're aggressive when it comes to putting together a 30-year plan. And as the things change, as you mentioned, that it's important that we're on top of it, because that actually affects our 5-year forecast as operating in our township, and keeping that ahead of us as opposed to behind us.
We have the privilege of being on the leading edge of that. Us and the rest of Livingston County were the first housing bubble to pop, and it's not just our problem, it's a problem in many areas throughout the state. We were just at the forefront of it, and we've had the opportunity to present it at statewide conference about, the modeling that we've done and how it's helped us. So it's been a good example. I haven't gotten around to it, but I intend to write a MTA article on it someday. But.
And I don't know if you mentioned it, but the name Boyle
Yeah.
It's the name of the company and the person that helped develop the model. So if you want the Boyle, it's BOYLE. But it's just, when you're talking about sewer, it's nice to make sure that you're talking about...
He's an actuary.
He's actually
He's an actuary.
the bow tie model, we call it.
Right. Well, thank you. And again, it's important that I think we give a little explanation to some of these elements. People are wondering, what are you talking
Do I
about?
have to do that every time I mention it now?
Okay. Once in a while.
Find benefit plans going away. Actuary's got to find another job.
Once a year at a
Once a year at a December meeting.
Very good.
Good, thank you.
Sure. So the other thing is the CIP is, so we're talking CIP-like language when it comes to prioritizing these projects for next year, but really the next step is to pull that together into a 2-year CIP with a long-term vision. Eventually we'll get to a 5-year CIP, but as we work through this 2-year strategic planning, 2-year budgeting, we're going to walk before we run on doing a 2-year CIP, and then next year move towards a 5-year. So that should be done in the April timeframe. And then we want to get a head start, too, on doing the strategic plan updates. If you recall from Dr. Bender's notes, his recommendation is to continue to talk about these issues throughout the year. And basically, as you look down these lists of things, you can guarantee that almost every board meeting agenda will have one of these topics on there. We'll be talking it through. We'll be bringing in the department head to kind of talk about the 5-year vision and what we're doing the next year, and start talking about years out, moving towards achieving the vision. And so that hopefully by September of next year, we're already got the strategic plan set for the next 2 years. So that's the goal, which means there'll probably be a lot of those meetings happening here in May, June, July, and wrapping up a document in September is the goal. And then on the community development front, we can coordinate meetings with some of those major developers. We talked about that, being proactive. And then probably one of the more significant steps is start completing a new comprehensive plan. I know there was some discussion in the retreat about whether to just do an amendment to the existing one or whether we wanted to undertake a new comprehensive plan process. There's definitely a lot to be said on either side of that. Obviously, the ultimate goal is recognizing a lot has changed since 2004, not just economically, but also in housing trends and what the housing stock demands are. And so, given that the comprehensive plan is 10 years old now, and if we anticipate that there is going to be more development in the coming years, there's no better time than now, rather than wishing we had done it a couple years from now. So,
is this starting or ending in next year?
It'd be starting in 14, and we'd be wrapping it up by March of 2015.
Just making sure that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So we'd be, It's a big project, no doubt about it. That'll keep
Planning Commission,
planning department, planning commission pretty busy, and you're invited too. But there'll be, you know the process. You've been through it.
Was there, we talked about it, I think.
And if you don't want to do it again,
at the administration,
don't be around 10 years.
At our administration meeting, we talked about perhaps bringing in a consultant to assist with that.
Well, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be, and it's not it could be upwards of $40,000. I don't know how much it costs then, but it'd be a significant project using consultants, and we'd it'd still take a lot of staff resources too. But
the real concern I have here is we just updated our zoning ordinance. It's now what do we call that?
Clear zoning.
Clear zoning. And here we are. It seemed to me those things should have been almost hand in hand. I mean, we updated the zoning ordinance with clear zoning. I can't imagine unless there's some major changes in the comprehensive plan, like some new sort of land designations or changes in that. Maybe I'm not. I would like to really hear what the planning commission maybe has and our planner to kind of point out some areas that perhaps need revisions as opposed to a complete overhaul or review of the comprehensive plan, because I think we lost a few years because of the recession. We certainly, our anticipation when we adopted it 10 years ago, and then 5 years, I think there were some tweaks or whatever, and then here we are 10 years later. I'm almost inclined to believe that much of what's in our master plan, or not the zoning, but the land use map, hasn't significantly changed. Now, maybe those special planning areas or that we identified, maybe those might change. I guess I'm looking, Larry, what are your thoughts on that? It just seems to me that if we start a new comprehensive plan and spend a lot of money on that, only to find out that really there isn't a whole lot of changes, I just do not do that without first kind of mapping out or an outline saying, okay, here's some areas that we need to look at.
Well, we talked about it briefly at our admin meeting last Thursday, and I guess there would be pros and cons to both sides of it. You could probably deal with a lot of the stuff on a small scale. I kind of wonder, if there would be some value to the Planning Commission as a whole to go through the process, because none of them have been through that process. It was all done by the previous Planning Commission members. We have a new Planning Commission member starting next year. We have, a few that are a couple years under their belts. So I think there'd be some value to them. I guess it's up to us to weigh what that value would be. I'm not saying just spend $40,000 because to make our Planning Commission members feel more comfortable with it. But we had talked, too, about, that the comprehensive plan should probably integrate things like our strategic plan, our park master plan, water master plan, sewer master plan a little bit better than it currently does. So
I would agree
that would
with
be
you
an
on that.
advantage to going through the process as well.
I'm just wondering, and obviously we can amend our zoning ordinance, and we have from time to time. I'm concerned that major changes to the comprehensive plan may result in a huge cost or expense to the clear zoning ordinances.
Yeah, I know, Larry can maybe speak to that better. I don't know that would be the case necessarily. I mean, we're talking about a future land use which has zone sort of definition versus if somebody come in for rezoning.
Yeah, I mean, my gut sitting here would be that the zoning ordinance could already allow those things. I mean, we might have some shifts in densities, but I think we already have the classifications within the zoning ordinance that would allow those to fit in.
And some of the things I've been talking about, I think there's a potential that some of the changes could be more than small. I mean, we're talking about some changes in density and size, lot sizes, types of housing, those types of things that because of the change in the housing market, but also where the infrastructure is at, and there could be, I think, more change. The types of changes are not insignificant. And I echo the point, I'm the one that raised it, that the comprehensive plan document itself is not as much a part of our organizational culture as it should be. It should be, they all ought to dovetail to one another, and I think there's definitely room for improvement there. Obviously, it's up to the board whether you want to undertake that or just do simple revision. I don't know if there's other thoughts.
I agree with Joe. Before we go forward, though, we should identify potential weaknesses and areas of concern.
Like at least kind of right. Like not a comprehensive list, but just kind of an outline of some of the things that
we should need to look at.
We need to look at. I mean, certainly the SEMCOG data that was used 10 years ago.
We can update that.
That's easy to update.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, certain things have shifted, but I agree. And are these new planning commissioners? Are they going to the citizen planning conference?
Two of them have just completed it.
Okay.
Keith Voigt went to it, Mike Mitchell went to it, and just finished up within the last month or two.
And we are speaking with them and letting them know that we encourage them to take that or other classes that'll benefit them as planners. We have a new one joining next month.
Is that Murphy?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I ran into him.
Yeah.
That's great.
So.
So we will, one of the goals would be that next, maybe as early as next meeting, we can sort of adopt this outline as the strategic plan for next year so we can wrap up our budget proposal. And what I can do is I can try to get some of those thoughts gathered together maybe by next meeting for the comprehensive plan. We do have a break in there, obviously, but to make sure the board's questions are answered. And then the last thing that was identified out of the retreat was to keep doing what we're doing, keep the course on this branding effort, and there's more work being done on that. Hopefully we'll have something everybody can buy into shortly.
I had a question, and I don't know if if you have the answer, Rep. You brought two examples to us as something that we might want to consider, and I just was curious because I think there was a group that was selected, like a focus group, that initially looked at that. The different two brands. Was it like 100 people or something? Or?
Well, there was a survey and focus groups that touched about 97 people. That
I was just curious what the business community, some of the representatives in the business community, if they were part of that, and what your read was, if you had any information on that.
Yeah, so we had a session focus group specifically for them, and of course they were generally invited to the public ones, and we also made the electronic survey available to the business community. I couldn't tell you sitting here how many of the 97 represented businesses. There were a fair number of them. I do know that we were somewhat disappointed in turnout at one of the meetings.
Do you think it might be worthwhile to maybe... I know that their chamber meets, and so does is it the Rotary, which is the other group that...
Larry's in the Rotary.
Community Council?
The Community Council, maybe give that same presentation you gave to us. This is kind of what we're thinking about doing, and we've tried to create a little more buzz around it to see what input people or groups might have.
So that was the early stage. After we actually had concepts to look at and tagline concepts, we did bring those back to schools, to the Chamber of Commerce here. There was a couple of school parents also we had opportunity to talk to, and then we had even more follow-up discussions at a chamber function. We were there, and we kind of were pulling people aside to look at them and getting their feedback. So I think we've done quite a bit of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious. And on your list here, community development, we had a series of meetings with the business community. I think we met one time, talked about science, and you've had some follow-up meetings after that. Are we continuing that dialogue with our business community about issues so they, we're continuing that effort?
So you'll see you saw the draft of that press release tomorrow on our partnership with the Chamber, on our Partners in Progress, presenting some opportunities for that dialogue with our business community to continue. There will be, so that'll be going out there and letting people know about that. That specific initiative was not getting a lot of response. So in its form as it was, we probably won't continue it. We've talked about maybe doing an online video to allow for more participation and not require people to come here at a certain time to see it. We haven't necessarily gotten a lot of response that was hitting the mark, that some of our other efforts are doing better, so we're concentrating more there. But some way, shape, or form, we'll come back to something like that, especially if we have a hot topic that will have interest. And I think you'll see it, we've talked about taking a look at the sign ordinance next year. We're definitely going to make everybody aware, including the Chamber and the business community, that we are looking at the sign ordinance, so we'll listen to that feedback through the Planning Commission, public hearings and whatnot.
Well, I am a little concerned with that approach there. I mean, it could have died out. You made a comment that it sort of died out, and I'm a little concerned with that because it's like, I think we had a good turnout that first meeting, and then I think there was another turnout that was fairly well attended, wasn't it? There was a subsequent.
No, the second one was, we've had two of them. The first one was okay turnout, yeah. The second one.
We got a lot of press on that about addressing some of those issues and some of the issues that were brought up by the business community. So, I still want to find a way that we can continue that outreach.
I think we are, just in other, more effective ways.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we've, the ongoing meetings with the chamber, we're sort of proving the model and the concept already with a couple of test cases that have come where business community member comes to the chamber with a concern. Chamber was able to act as a facilitator of conversation. We were able to demonstrate flexibility and options that were positively received. That's working well for us. And so we'll continue to build on that. We're talking tomorrow with staff about sort of our own internal type ombudsman, type of a customer care type approach. So I think it's been well received. Any other thoughts or feedback before we look to finalize this?
Joe, when are you expecting the budget for the fire authority?
You will have the draft by the end of the month.
And will that have a capital improvement plan along with it?
Oh, yeah.
Does it go out a couple of years, or it seems like it used to go out 5 years?
I don't know that. I don't know if it goes out 5 years.
I did have a question. It seemed to me in the previous strategic plan there was something about new sewer ordinance and new water ordinance. Are those nearing completion?
I'm getting a draft of those on Monday, I think it is. Or, the 20th? No. Friday, 20th. So those will be forthcoming, yeah.
Tax collection. Do you want to mention anything about that?
It's on every tax bill.
Okay, just wanted to the hall will be closed next week?
Yes.
Over the holiday. It will open again the following Monday and Tuesday until 4 o'clock.
We're up till 4 on New Year's Eve.
And then
we'll
it's
close on New Year's Day.
And open again on the day after.
Yes, correct.
So if people do want to make a tax payment during that time, they're accepted at First National Bank, Chase Bank, both the Hartland branches. You can put it in our box outside the door, and everything will be done on December 30th when we get back.
Okay.
May I ask one question? On going back to the strategic plan and the idea of trying to have compiling a 2-year capital improvement plan by next April, what, at this point, do we envision that capital improvement plan consisting of? Is it strictly water and sewer? Since the roads committee's not going to be finished and
right,
parks committees won't know.
It's a good question. Water has its own CIP, and so we're already in our 5-year CIP, so there's kind of keep it separate, but mostly it's probably going to be parks and then some of the other projects we've talked about, whether it be sidewalks, some spot, not necessarily all of the pathways that we'd like to see, but some ones that are of higher priority. And that's probably the extent of it. And it'll be the items that are sort of at the forefront of, we know, even though we're going to be doing this Parks Master Plan through, won't be done till early in 2015, we still the board is going to know what projects it's going to want to undertake in 14 and probably in 15. So
timing-wise, James, would this be completed before or after we adopt our next fiscal budget?
The 2-year CIP probably wouldn't be finalized until we adopt the budget. the major components of it will already be in the budget that the board is looking at, because next month, I'm going to be bringing that project list to you, and we're going to try to identify, okay, what do you want to do in 2014? If we can nail those down, they'll be in the adopted budget. If for some reason, we pause on that, we can always amend the budget later.
What was your logic in picking April?
You said only one question.
Yeah.
It's the same topic. Picking April for that deadline, is there a reason why we can't do it in February or March?
Probably not. April. So getting a CIP was already in the existing strategic plan. We said we would start it in December, and our plan was to have it wrapped up by April, so we just kept that. There's a fairly reasonable chance we can get it done before then. I don't want to commit anybody to something that I can't deliver, but.
You'd like to have that be part of when we adopt the budget, what we're planning for the year.
What's the point of doing the plan if you're not going to use it to try to budget what you want done? That's my point.
Yeah, things are out of order.
I think through the discussions, Matt, we could identify some of those and have, even if it's not the complete list.
Yes.
There could be some of those things adopted before the budget that we definitely plan on doing. I could foresee that.
I think we'll know in January, hopefully, that what the board intends to get done in 2014. That'd be my goal, to have it all pulled together in a CIP and a CIP that goes out into a second year. Will take a little bit more work. It's a worthy goal.
You're concerned about 2014. And I agree with
question
James.
that Larry had the very first thing tonight. We're projecting a big surplus. Do we want to put it all into CIP? What do we want to do with it?
Right.
You tell me.
Now, we'll leave the second now because Joe said that was your third.
My other question is not really a question, it's an observation. The strategic plan that was presented tonight is loaded very heavily in 2014, and it looks like we won't have very much to do in 2015. Are you trying to be proactive in getting everything done quickly, or should we move some of these things out into 2015? Or is this I guess I turned it into a question of, or is this an incomplete strategic strategic plan that we need to add more things to fill it up?
No to the latter. Good observation. May I respond to that, even though it wasn't a question? So really, the retreat focus was what is next year's task, 2014. So the goal coming out of the retreat was to come up with a strategic plan just for 2014. A couple of reasons why you see 2015 on there. One is, our charge was to take a look at it and say, is it feasible, is it reasonable to accomplish all these things in 2014? And for a couple of items, we're saying, no, let's push that into early 2015. If it weren't for that, you'd only see 2014 on there. The other thing is we need to start thinking in bigger chunks of time. And so I've already got a list of notes that continue these strategic initiatives with tasks in 2015. I'm not looking to adopt that yet. Let's get 2014 adopted, and then when we're meeting in May, June, July, and by September, we're adopting a strategic plan that covers 2 years worth of time, 15 and 16. So that's eventually where we're going. There are plenty of tasks that are continuations of these things that we'll be doing in 2015. We just haven't gone through the exercise of identifying them yet. That's coming.
Can you shrink your overhead so people can see see how congregated we are in 2014? That's what I'm kind of getting.
And if it weren't for these two things, it would all be in 2014. We're just saying that those are going to take till early 2015. So,
okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Your good answers and the patience from my fellow board members.
Is there anything else this evening? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Motion by Trustee Germain, second by Clerk Hopkins. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Everybody have a great holiday.